What if I told you there was a private banker who actually saved the U.S. economy once? What if I told you that there was a Republican president who didn't cater to corporate business interests? Or that the history of women in combat actually dates back to the Second World War? Anyone? In this two-part series, Stranger Things Have Happened, I'd like to dispel some of what popular opinion dictates these days about the aforementioned, starting with bankers and Republicans. From the time my age was still in the single digits, I was subconsciously pondering the duality of what it meant to be an American. A perpetual tug-of-war between fundamental and progressive, to be given pre-packaged sets of values to decide on. Is it a matter of individual rights, or a matter of the greater good? I'm still not sure there's an answer. I heard laissez-faire, in reference to free enterprise, was synonymous with capitalism, and, as far as I can tell, all capitalism means is making money. But, for all intents and purposes, capitalism and free enterprise are most often referenced in the context of deregulating businesses. In no era of American history was this truer than that of the Gilded Age, when the names Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan achieved both notoriety and infamy. The second stock market crash that occurred during my lifetime is by and large blamed on a deregulated banking industry. As of 2012, all of the major U.S. banks found themselves downgraded as a result of the calamity that was 2008 and the subsequent crises that followed. That's not even the twisted part, though. The twisted part is that it was intentional, and that the powers that be are so profit-motivated that they're willing to cripple their own credibility, all in the name of turning a buck. Ironically, the Gilded Age was an era where the exploits of industry were even more unfettered yet, when history's most powerful monopolies had reached a culmination. J.P. Morgan followed in the footsteps of his father, Junius Spencer Morgan, into the world of finance. Drawing inspiration from Andrew Carnegie's Sovereignty of Steel and John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust, Morgan saw banking as the industry to encompass all others. And he was right. In 1873, it was J.P. Morgan who underwrote federal bonds to help America refinance the Civil War debt. Again in 1877, when Congress failed to adopt a budget to pay for the Army, J.P. Morgan provided the War Department with over $500,000 per month. By 1900, he controlled over a sixth of the country's railroads and consolidated 6 systems for America's railroad network that ran from New York. He also invested as much capital as he could into the work of Thomas Edison. The two went on to electrify the entire city of New York and form Edison General Electric. Morgan had the opportunity to merge the company with Thomas Houston. Edison, on the other hand, hoped not to, as his name would be erased from the company, but since Edison showed no financial prowess, Morgan disregarded Edison's concerns and went on to form what is today known as General Electric. In October of 1907, when America was enduring a financial crisis, Morgan prevented the stock market from closing early by raising $25 million in just 15 minutes. He controlled 70% of the steel industry, a fifth of the corporations trading on the New York Stock Exchange, America's 3 largest insurance companies, and several other banks other than his namesake. A famous quote from Morgan is that a man always has 2 reasons for doing a thing, a good reason and the real reason. So, if you ever want to know what's going on in the head of a banker, you heard it right from the source. In fact, Morgan conspired alongside his fellow titans at one point to buy an election. When William Jennings Bryan of the Populist Party campaigned on the general public's outrage toward the major monopolies, Morgan, Rockefeller, and Carnegie consolidated to combat Bryan's campaign by giving a total of $600,000 to the campaign of William McKinley. McKinley outspent Bryan by a ratio of 5-1, won the election, and left the business interests of the Titans unrestrained. But during his second term in 1901, McKinley was assassinated, and then Vice President Theodore Roosevelt took over. Next to the Panama Canal, the most noteworthy accomplishment of Teddy Roosevelt's presidency was enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act. As a result, the monopolies that Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Morgan fought to retain were dissolved. After learning that the president was going on safari in Africa, J.P. Morgan was quoted in saying, "I trust the first lion he meets will do his duty." My initiative for this project was inspired by issues ranging from the stock market crash of '08 and the resentment consequently expressed toward bankers to the sentiment that the Republican Party is the only one in corporate pockets. Then again, stereotypes exist for a reason. But, in regard to politicians being held hostage to lobbyists, Democrats and Republicans alike, one of the popular avenues for this is defense contracts. Defense contracts mean jobs in the district. Jobs in the district mean re-election. Consequently, the Pentagon gets stuck with merchandise they don't need or even want. One recent instance of this involves manufacturer General Dynamics, who provides our military with the M1 Abrams tank. Congress reached a bipartisan decision ordering new tanks from the company and to refurbish and update the current fleet. One of the outspoken critics of this initiative, which could cost taxpayers $3 billion, has been U.S. Army Chief of Staff General Odierno, who was quoted in saying, "Our tank fleet is in good shape." He went on to explain that the U.S. has more than enough combat tanks in the field to meet the nation's defense needs. Furthermore, the Army is planning to stop purchasing the Abrams in 2014 and doesn't need to upgrade its current fleet until the year 2017. General Dynamics explained to CNN that halting production of the tanks would affect 16,000 jobs and 882 suppliers. Like any other industry in the lobby, General Dynamics has not been shy about making campaign contributions. Representative Sylvester Rees, a Democrat who was serving in Texas, was provided with $64,000 by General Dynamics since 2001 and went on to play the national security card himself despite General O's rebuttal of that argument. Side note, Rees has not been reelected in his district. The private sector's manipulation of politicians on both sides of the aisle ties the hands of elected officials on the same wavelength that hospital treatment plans are devised by insurance companies instead of doctors. Another point I return to is that while I'm not warm to the board of directors at Goldman Sachs, I believe that banks are a necessary and potentially constructive entity. My interest in the life and times of J.P. Morgan is due largely to the notion that in many ways he made legitimate contributions to society. A private banker that helped the U.S. economy was a notion that even Donald Trump had to admit seemed absurd. Not every Republican is a corporate shill. Not everyone who works on Wall Street is a scumbag. Moral of the story? Don't be so trigger-happy about the surface understanding of an issue despite what popular opinion might dictate. You never know who you might actually hit it off with.
As always, thanks for watching. And I know I gave you a longer presentation this time, so thanks for staying the course. See you next time for Part 2, Women in Combat, A History Dismissed.